Hello and welcome to Chapter 7, where we're going to review distribution and service. So let's start with different types of distribution. The distribution of food production to the customer depends primarily on four factors: the type of production system in use, degree of meal pre-assembled prior to service, the physical distance between production and service, and the amount of time between completion of production and until the time of service. As the time between the completion of production and the time of services increases, and/or the distance between the two increases, the options for distribution practices and equipment, as you can imagine, also increases. Let's talk about some categories of service. And there's a lot of different ones to choose from. And they can be categorized in a lot of different ways. And in fact, a number of combination services do exist, such as table service, counter service, self-service, delivery, and so forth. So we're going to talk about each one individually. Let's start with table. Table service is probably your most common form of service in the commercial segment of the industry. It can be very simple or extremely elaborate. Its distinguishing characteristics is service by a waiter or a wait person. In most table service operations, a hostess or host is responsible for seating guests in the dining room. Then waitstaff personnel take orders from customers and then deliver the meals. There is often a separate bus staff that's responsible for refilling beverages and cleaning the different tables. Next is counter service, and this is found in diners and coffee shops and other establishments in which patrons are looking for speedy service. People can eat alone or join others at the counter and enjoy the companionship. So you can think of this like at an old school Denny's counter, where you could sit at the counter by yourself, enjoy a meal where the wait staff provides you the meal. And they provide fast service for the customer, but also efficient for the establishment. Because that counter attendant, they're usually responsible, like I said, for taking the orders, but they also serve, they bus it, and they oftentimes will cash you out as well. Next is self-service. This operation covers a large spectrum. Cafeteria is probably the most common used forms of this. In self-service, the customer chooses what they want from a display of food items or service counters. So this can also be considered like vending machines as well. Tray service is next, and this is which a food is carried on a tray to a person by a food service employee. This is used mostly in healthcare institutions, or it also can be seen for in-flight meal service in the airline industry. Room service, in which food is served on a tray or on a cart in a customer's hotel or motel room, is a variation of this type of service. Next is takeout. This is probably what we're all familiar with, right, to a certain degree. This is probably the most rapid growing area of food service. And Americans really were cooking less at home, and in part because of increased number of family members who work outside the home and the pressure to balance work and family life. And also the lack of cooking skills and abilities oftentimes then delineates, or we rely on takeout service more. Takeout service allows consumers to purchase food at one location and then enjoy their food in a location of their choice. And last is delivery. Delivery service is another rapidly growing aspect, especially now that we have things like Grubhub and Postmates and DoorDash. Delivery service involves transporting prepared food items for the food service operation to the customer. Typically, delivery is either to the customer's home or office, and a fee is often charged for this service. The one challenge a food service operation faces in the delivery process is ensuring that the proper food temperatures are maintained during the delivery. Now let's talk about the different nuances of table service. We talked about that in the last slide, what it really means, but there are different types of styles when it comes to table service. It can be, like we said, very simple or very elaborate. And the wait staff personnel takes orders from the customer, delivers meals. The most common of table service in the U.S. is often referred to as the American style service. This involves plating the food in the kitchen or service kitchen and then presenting it to the guest. In a more elaborate service, this is referred to sometimes as French style, where the food is prepared at the table. An example of this could be like Bananas Foster or Steak Diane. And last, another type is called family style, in which food is brought to the table on platters, large platters or bowls by the waitstaff, and then passed around the table by the guests, where the guests then help themselves from the larger portion size. All right, we did mention self-service in the last couple of slides, and there are some delineations or different types of self-service that we're going to go into. First is cafeteria. This is the most common used, as mentioned. Includes things, is typically characterized by advanced preparation and self-service, or employee served at most, if not all the menu items. It's a predominant form of service used in on-site food service operations and employee feeding operations. Then we have quick serve. This is used to describe service situations where the customer comes to a central ordering or pickup location to order and pay for the food. Service staff takes the order and collects payment for the order, and then the order is assembled and given to the customer. In some cases, the service staff assembles all or parts of the order, and in other situations, separate staff are used to take order and collect payment and then assemble the order. In some quick service operations, a guest is given a number and then their order is delivered to the table, like in Panera if you've ever been there. Buffet. Buffet is next. So it's enjoyed increasing popularity in recent years. It is a type of service where guests obtain all or portion of their food from one large buffet table. Buffet service enables the facility to serve a lot more people in a given time with a lot less employees. The usual procedure for this is for guests to select the entree, vegetable, and salad from a buffet table before going to the dining table where their flatware, napkins, and water are located. And then we have vending machines. This is dubbed the silent salesperson with a built-in cash register, annually moving billions of dollars of product and service to customers around the world. Even though external customers communicate only with the vending machine employees, the internal customer, there is some work behind the scenes to ensure that the customer's needs are being met, such as filling the vending machine and making sure that it's operating appropriately. And last is mobile food service. You can think of this as our food trucks, where you're ordering from a location that moves depending on the day or the time, and they usually have a very abbreviated menu where it's similar to quick service, where you may go order your item at the window and then wait for your number to be called, but they may not be in the same location each day or at each designated time. So there are some patterns, customer service patterns that we should talk about. And it really goes into achieving quality customer service. And that requires excellence in both procedural and personal dimensions of customer service. So we'll talk about 4 basic patterns. The first is a freezer. This is a pattern of service in which there is poor procedural and personal service. And it conveys the message, we don't really care much about you. And there's factory. This is a pattern of service that is skewed towards procedural efficiency. Service may be very timely and efficient, but employees are cold and impersonal, leaving the customer with the impression, you're just a number, and we are here to serve you as efficiently as we can. Then you have the friendly zoo, which is a pattern of service in which employees are very friendly, genuine, and caring, but service is very slow, inconsistent, and disorganized. It sends a message to the customers that we're trying real hard, but we don't really know what we're doing. And last is quality customer service. This is a pattern of service in which both personal and procedural dimensions are handled well. And it conveys the message, we care about you, we know what we're doing, and we deliver. Let's talk a little bit about gracious problem solving. So this is a skill that's really important for really anybody in food service industry or really any kind of customer service industry. Management's typically the ones that get involved in dealing with problems. And your text has outlined 7 gracious steps for problem solving. So let's list them out. The first of the steps is service provider listens carefully to the problem or the complaint. The service provider then repeats the complaint or the problem to get acknowledgement that the customer has been heard correctly. Somewhere along the way, the service provider should apologize to the customer regardless of who's responsible for the problem or complaint. And this goes to the old adage, the customer is always right. The service provider acknowledges the guest's feelings, whether that's anger or frustration or disappointment. And then the service provider makes problem solving a two-way process by asking the customer how he or she would like that problem resolved. Would they like a refund? Would they like it to be remade? What is it that would make them happy to make the problem go away? The service provider then explains what actions can be taken to solve the problem or revert a wrong into a right. So maybe they're not sure what options they have, and so this is the opportunity to explain what options they could take to make the problem better. And then the service provider says thank you to the guest for bringing the problem or complaint to their attention. And let's talk a little bit about authenticity, especially when you're apologizing like we just mentioned. There's some perceived or genres of perceived authenticity. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different types here. There are 5 general genres of perceived authenticity. Businesses should be more successful if they incorporate authenticity into their planning. Right? And you can tell when somebody's not being authentic with you, and it oftentimes leaves a bad taste in your mouth. So as a business, it's something you should strive for. Natural authenticity, this is perceived as authentic because it's in its natural state, not artificial or synthetic. For example, here you could think of organic foods or handmade soaps. Original authenticity, this is perceived as authentic because of its original design or for being the first of its kind and not a copy. For example, the iPod or Coca-Cola in a glass bottle. Exceptional authenticity, it's perceived as authentic because what they do is done exceptionally well, executed individually. An example here of a company that would be perceived to have exceptional authenticity would be like Nordstrom's or the Ritz-Carlton. Referential authenticity is perceived as authentic because of the inspiration from human history or shared memories. For example, here is the Chinese tea ceremony or neon lights in Las Vegas. And last is influential authenticity. This is perceived as authentic because of influence exerted on others, calling human beings to a higher goal. For an example here would be Hard Rock Cafe's Save the Planet, a sustainable slogan, and the Eden Alternative Elderly Housing, which focuses on improved elder care, reducing boredom, loneliness, and helplessness.